have been propagating this concept of personifying nature, and the best example, of course, is this picture you see right now of Mother Nature. What I'd like to do in this very short vignette here is describe what an empathy map is about. I'm going to describe basically this thing behind me. It's a tree that we have in our garden. It's a cherry tree. And I thought it would be good to describe something that I have a relationship to and try to portray that information to you. And I'm doing this live, though, so you realize if I make mistakes, it's all part of being live. And then put through a call to action for those of you who would be interested in trying it out yourself. And we'll be coming up with a series here very, very shortly. The idea here is that you understand whatever you're trying to describe in a much more emotional way, and it's comprised of 4 parts. Think, feel, see, do. Now, with the thinking part, this is all tied to some sort of problem or situation that you're trying to describe. So how is this person actually thinking? How do they feel about the situation? What's influencing those individuals? And how do they deal with it today? And of course, for me, I'm not talking about a human being. I'm talking about this thing. Now, this tree, just a little brief history. As I mentioned, it's the cherry tree. And our gut feeling, it has to be a good 80 years old at least. And you look at it and you see that it is old. And I thought that would be very fitting because I'm not necessarily a spring chicken either. I'm not as fit as I was at one time, but I still like to think I'm productive. And so I could definitely relate to this cherry tree. And so let me go ahead and get started with the empathy map. And one last thing I'd like to go ahead and tell you about this empathy map. Very possibly, you might think that what I'm talking about under thinking might be getting close to the feeling part. And so I will concentrate primarily on the fears when I get to feeling. I'm probably mix up the elements a little bit, but that's all good for artistic measure. So thinking. I've been here longer than these humans have been. And so if we're talking about rights, I have many more rights than these humans. Although I have to admit, the crew that's responsible for me now are much better than the ones I had before. But there is a serious problem with the way that these humans look at things. They think that they build their own nature within these little gardens, and they try to make them look very nice, which is all fine. It's more of a show-off thing than really trying to support nature, but we'll leave that for another program. But the real issue is not just that the people that are taking care of me, more or less, that they're managing that process, but all of their neighbors think they've created their own mini nature in their gardens, and they do all kinds of things that are not very healthy for me, especially when they pull out the pesticide and they think that just stays within their confines and don't realize that it doesn't really help my health too much. I've been around for a while. I can handle that pretty good, but I'm more concerned about those other plants that are coming in that don't have the stamina that I have. And as I mentioned, I am not a spring chicken, and that makes it difficult every year because at this time of the year, this is when the cherries come to bloom. First of all, I have a huge weight that I need to deal with all these leaves. And nobody can make the claim that I'm not productive because I create enough cherries out of this tree. In fact, I could feed the whole neighborhood. They shouldn't eat them all at the same time because they'll definitely get cramps. But there's no question that I'm being productive here, but it becomes more and more difficult. I need to make sure I get enough water. I need to make sure that I have my strength by the time this time of the year shows up. And I notice every year it takes more and more out of me. What's influencing me? Obviously, making sure I get enough water. These people that are taking care of me, quote unquote, they do a pretty good job, but I still have to rely upon the water that comes from the sky, and sometimes it shows up and sometimes it doesn't. I try to support all kinds of life within this tree, especially birds. The birds like coming to visit, and I really like it when they come. They usually show up about twice a day, one time in the morning and then in the later afternoon or maybe in the evening, and they make a nice sound and I enjoy listening to them. And so how do I deal with this? How do I manage this year in and year out? Well, I already go into my pregame. I get mentally prepared for this time of the year so that when it comes, I am fit. I'm mentally fit. And so I try to tighten up and make sure that I have as much strength as possible so that when the leaves come and the cherries come and the birds come and all of the insects are coming, that I'm able to go ahead and handle them. And knock on wood, no pun intended, I've been doing a pretty good job, and I hope that I can continue. And I hope that these human beings don't look at me one day and consider me to be a danger, because they keep chopping off certain parts, as you can see in the back. Let's go ahead and do this way, and we do this way, no, this way. They keep chopping off parts of my entities, and it doesn't really help me out sometimes. And I'm waiting for the day when they decide we're going to cut the whole thing off. Okay, folks, that was my attempt at an empathy map. That you try it out yourself. I'd like you to go ahead and try it out yourself. This is a clear call to action. You might have a different relationship to the object that you're trying to describe. And I'd like to think that you might look at this tree, the one I've been describing, perhaps in a different way, different than the way that you would have looked at it otherwise. I would hope that you would consider these inanimate objects to be stakeholders too, which means that you're going to look at them differently. You're going to take their needs into account. And then lastly, I would hope that maybe you might have a bit of a different relationship to nature than you did before. And I think if we're able to go ahead and accomplish that, then we did something really good.